Rain poured down relentlessly, drenching the empty pathways of Central Park. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the ground, while trees bent and groaned under the force of the storm. The night was dark and unforgiving, but it was no match for the fear pounding inside Emma's chest. Liam! Liam, where are you? Her voice cut through the storm, desperate and broken. She ran, slipping on the wet grass, her eyes scanning every shadow, every bench, every corner. But there was nothing, no sign of her 6-year-old son. Liam, answer me! Then she heard it, a faint, trembling voice carried by the wind. Mom, I'm scared. Emma froze. It was him, Liam, her blind little boy who couldn't see the danger around him. She sprinted toward the sound, her heart slamming against her ribs. Rain soaked through her clothes, but she didn't care. All she could think about was the moment she looked away, the moment everything changed. They had been sitting on a park bench, Liam listening to the birds chirping and smiling like he always did when he felt at peace. Then her phone rang, a call from her boss about yet another missed shift. She turned away for just a second, long enough for Liam to wander off. And now he was gone. A flash of lightning lit up the park, and Emma saw him, standing at the edge of the pond. Water rippled and surged as the storm poured into it, the surface dark and menacing. Liam stood perfectly still, his tiny hands trembling at his sides. Liam, don't move, Emma screamed. Mom! His voice was barely a whisper. I heard something crying. Emma's legs gave out, and she fell hard onto the wet ground. But before she could scramble back up, another sound caught her attention. Heavy footsteps through the mud. Her breath hitched. Someone, or something, was there. A dark figure emerged from the shadows, massive and wild. Emma's first thought was terror. Was it a predator? A threat? Her body tensed, ready to protect her son at all costs. But then, in the next flash of lightning, she saw it clearly. A dog. It was large, drenched, and scarred, its fur matted and dirty. Its piercing eyes locked onto Liam, and for a moment, Emma's fear returned. But the dog didn't lunge. It didn't growl. Instead, it stepped forward with calm determination. No! Emma shouted, her voice trembling. Stay away from him! But Liam didn't flinch. It's okay, Mom, he said softly. I can feel it. It's not here to hurt me. The dog leaned down and with remarkable gentleness took the hem of Liam's jacket in its teeth. Slowly, carefully, it pulled him back from the edge of the pond. Emma reached them just in time, scooping Liam into her arms and holding him tight. Her tears mixed with the rain as relief washed over her, but her eyes never left the dog. Thank you, she whispered, barely believing the words had come out of her mouth. Liam reached out and touched the dog's soaked fur. He's my angel, Mom. I know he is. Emma looked into the dog's eyes. There was something there, something beyond instinct. Wisdom, courage, pain. It wasn't just a dog, it was a protector. Thunder rolled through the sky again, but this time Emma didn't flinch. She held Liam closer, and the dog sat beside them, unmoving, as if guarding them from the storm itself. She didn't know where this dog had come from or why it had appeared tonight. But one thing was clear. Max wasn't leaving, and neither was the feeling that, somehow, their lives had just changed forever. The rain had finally stopped by the time Emma stepped into her small apartment, her clothes still damp and her arms wrapped tightly around Liam. Max followed closely behind, his paws leaving muddy prints on the tile floor. He paused at the doorway, his scarred face scanning the dimly lit room before settling in a corner near Liam's feet, as if he'd always belonged there. Emma dropped onto the worn-out couch, pulling Liam onto her lap. She pressed her lips against his wet hair, unable to shake the lingering fear that still clung to her chest. Mom, he saved me, Liam said softly, reaching out to pat Max's head. I told you, he's my angel. Emma let out a shaky breath. She wanted to believe that, but the scars on the dog's body told a different story, one of hardship, pain, and maybe even danger. She couldn't ignore the risks, especially with Liam's safety on the line. We don't even know where he came from, Emma said, her voice low but firm. What if he's dangerous, Liam? What if... He's not, Liam interrupted, his small voice steady. I can feel it. He's here to help us. Max looked up at Emma as if he understood every word. His eyes, deep and soulful, held her gaze. It wasn't just intelligence she saw there. It was loyalty, devotion. Emma sighed. Just for tonight, she said, more to herself than to Liam. We'll figure this out tomorrow. But as the night wore on, it became clear that Max had already decided he wasn't going anywhere. The first sign came when Liam tried to walk to the kitchen. Max immediately stood up, positioning himself at the boy's side and guiding him carefully around furniture and corners. Emma watched amazed as Max gently nudged Liam's leg before each step, warning him of obstacles. You're better than my cane, Liam said with a grin, his fingers brushing Max's fur as they moved together through the small apartment. Emma's heart softened. For the first time in months, she saw confidence in Liam's steps, confidence that she'd worked so hard to build but never quite managed to give him. Later that night, after she had finally coaxed Liam into bed, Emma stood at the doorway, watching Max curl up on the floor beside him. The dog didn't sleep. Instead, he lay with his head up, eyes fixed on the bedroom door, as if guarding Liam from unseen threats. But not everyone welcomed Max. The next morning, Emma opened her front door to find Mrs. Peterson, her landlord, standing there with a clipboard and a disapproving frown. Emma, I heard about the dog, Mrs. Peterson said, eyeing Max warily as he stepped into view. You know the building doesn't allow large animals, especially ones with questionable histories. He's not dangerous, Emma said quickly. He saved Liam's life last night. I'm sure he's very sweet, Mrs. Peterson replied, her tone dripping with doubt. But rules are rules. I need to see paperwork, vaccines, registration, proof that he's safe. Emma felt her stomach tighten. She didn't have any of that. Max had come out of nowhere and there was no way to prove he belonged to anyone. I'll get the papers, Emma promised, though she had no idea how. But Mrs. Peterson didn't look convinced. She handed Emma a notice and walked away. Liam came to the door just as Emma closed it, his hand resting on Max's back. They don't want him here, do they? He asked quietly. Emma knelt down and took his hands. We're not giving up on him, she said. We just need to figure out a way to make this work. But the challenges were only beginning. Later that day, Emma received a call from Elizabeth, her former mother-in-law. I heard about the dog, Elizabeth said sharply. Emma, this is exactly why I've been worried about Liam. He needs stability, not a stray animal and a mother who can't even keep her job. Emma gritted her teeth. Max isn't just a stray. He's helping Liam. You should see the way they're already connected. What I see, Elizabeth said, is a woman who's in over her head. I've spoken to my lawyer. We're filing for emergency custody. The words hit Emma like a punch to the stomach. You can't do this, she said, her voice breaking. Think about what's best for Liam, Elizabeth replied coldly before hanging up. Emma sank into the couch, her hands trembling. Max, sensing her distress, came over and rested his head in her lap. What are we going to do, Max? She whispered. The dog didn't move, didn't flinch. He just stayed there, steady and unshakable, as if to say, we fight. But Emma's fears only deepened later that evening when she spotted a black SUV parked across the street. It had been there all day. Max growled low in his throat, his body tense as he stared out the window. Mom, what's wrong? Liam asked, hearing Max's growl. Emma forced a smile. Nothing, sweetheart. Everything's fine. But it wasn't. Not by a long shot. And as the shadows outside grew darker, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the storm they'd just survived was nothing compared to what was coming next. The night was unusually quiet. Too quiet. Emma sat on the edge of the couch, her hands gripping the phone as if it were a lifeline. Across the room, Max lay near the door, his body tense, ears perked at every creak and groan of the old apartment building. Liam was already in bed, but Emma couldn't rest. Her thoughts spiraled. Court papers, landlord threats, and now the black SUV that hadn't moved all day. She stood and peeked through the blinds. The SUV was still there, its headlights off but engine faintly humming. Max growled low, his eyes locked on the shadowy vehicle. Easy, boy, Emma whispered, stepping back, but her heart pounded. Then came the sound, a soft click at the front door. Max shot to his feet, snarling. Emma's pulse spiked. She grabbed the nearest object, a heavy lamp, and inched toward the door. Another click. The doorknob rattled. "Who's there?" Emma's voice wavered, but Max barked, a deep, guttural warning that sent chills down her spine. The rattling stopped. Footsteps retreated down the hall, fast but deliberate. Emma rushed to the peephole, but by the time she looked, whoever had been there was gone. Max didn't move from the door. "Good boy," Emma whispered, sinking to the floor. She buried her fingers in his fur, trying to calm her own trembling hands, but she knew it wasn't over. The next morning, Emma called the police. An officer showed up hours later, took her statement, and glanced at Max with wary eyes. "Probably just a drunk or someone checking for unlocked doors," the officer said, writing lazily in his notepad. "You should get better locks." "That's it?" Emma snapped. "Someone tried to break in while my son was sleeping." The officer shrugged. "Without proof, there's not much we can do. You should also think about that dog. He's big and people scare easy. You don't want more trouble with your neighbors." Emma bit her tongue, holding back the anger rising in her chest. After the officer left, she knelt beside Max. "They're not going to help us," she said, her voice low but determined. "We'll have to protect ourselves." Max wagged his tail once, as if to say, "I already knew that." But the fear didn't go away. Later that day, Emma took Liam to his piano lesson, trying to distract herself from the growing dread in her gut. Max walked beside Liam, his movements careful and deliberate as he guided the boy down the sidewalk. Emma noticed the black SUV again, this time parked 2 blocks away. "Stay close," she told Liam, gripping his shoulder. When they reached the music school, Emma felt eyes on her. She turned and saw a man in a dark suit leaning against the SUV, watching them. "Wait here," she told Liam, then marched toward the man. "Can I help you?" Her voice was sharp, but her hands were trembling. The man smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Nice dog. Must have taken some training." Emma's breath hitched. "What do you want?" "Just admiring," he said, stepping back into the SUV. "You take care of him. Dogs like that, they're valuable." The SUV pulled away, leaving Emma frozen in place. When she returned to Liam and Max, she forced a smile. "Everything okay, Mom?" Liam asked. Emma knelt down and kissed his forehead. "Yeah, sweetheart. Everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. That night, Emma double-checked the locks, stacked chairs against the door, and sat up with Max, waiting for something, anything to happen. Max never rested. His eyes scanned the room, ears twitching at the smallest noise. Then the phone rang. Emma jumped, her heart pounding as she grabbed it. A distorted voice came through the line. "You're running out of time. Hand over the dog or we'll take something more valuable." The call went dead. Emma's breath caught and she dropped the phone. Max stood and growled, sensing the fear radiating off her. Liam stirred in his room, calling out, "Mom?" Emma swallowed the panic rising in her throat. "I'm here, baby," she said, forcing her voice to steady. Max was already at the door, his body tense, ready. And in that moment, Emma knew. They weren't just fighting for Max, they were fighting for their family, and she wasn't going to let anyone take it away. The night was thick with tension. Emma couldn't sleep. She sat in the living room, her eyes fixed on the front door, her hands gripping the baseball bat she'd pulled from the closet earlier. Max lay beside her, his body stiff, ears twitching at every sound outside. The phone rang again. Emma flinched but quickly grabbed it. "Hello?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You've been warned," the voice said coldly. "We'll give you one more chance. Bring the dog to Highland Park tonight. Alone. Or you'll regret it." The line went dead. Emma's heart pounded. She turned to Max, who was already on his feet, eyes locked on her as if he understood what was coming. "We have to go," she whispered. Max's tail stiffened, and he moved to Liam's room. "Not him," Emma said quickly. She couldn't risk it. "I need you with me." Max hesitated, then followed as Emma grabbed her jacket and keys. She left a note for Liam, simple but reassuring. "Stay inside. I'll be back soon. I promise. I love you." The park was eerily empty when Emma arrived, the dim glow of streetlights casting long shadows. She clutched Max's leash tightly, scanning the area. Then she saw them, 2 men stepping out from behind a row of trees. "Nice of you to show up," one said, his voice dripping with smugness. Where's the boy? Emma's stomach churned. He's safe, she spat. You're not getting anywhere near him. Smart choice, the second man said, pulling out a leash and collar. Now hand over the dog. Max growled low, stepping forward to shield Emma. You can't have him, she said, her voice steady despite the fear rising inside her. The first man smirked. I was hoping you'd say that. Suddenly another figure appeared, a man in a dark suit stepping out from the shadows. It was the same man from the SUV. Take them both, he ordered. Everything happened at once. The men lunged, but Max exploded into motion. He knocked one of them down, teeth sinking into his arm, sending him howling to the ground. The second man grabbed for Emma, but she swung the bat, hitting him hard in the ribs. Run, Max, she shouted. But Max didn't run. He stayed, fighting off the first man, even as the second pulled out a stun gun. No! Emma screamed as Max yelped and collapsed. The men closed in. Emma dropped the bat, shielding Max with her body. Then the sirens came. Red and blue lights flashed through the trees as police cars screeched to a halt. Officers poured out, shouting commands. The men tried to flee, but it was too late. The police tackled them to the ground, cuffing their hands behind their backs. Emma felt her legs give out as relief washed over her. She reached for Max, who whimpered but lifted his head to look at her. You're okay, she whispered, tears mixing with the rain. You're okay. Liam's voice broke through the chaos. Mom! Emma turned to see him running toward her, escorted by a police officer. She scooped him up, holding him tight as Max struggled to stand. I told you to stay home, Emma said, her voice trembling. I had to come, Liam cried. I had to make sure Max was safe. Emma wiped her tears and looked down at Max, who leaned against her leg, exhausted but still standing. The officer approached. We've been tracking these guys for months, he said. They're part of a trafficking ring targeting trained service dogs. Your dog, he's a hero. Emma looked at Max, his scarred face and tired eyes filled with determination. No, she said softly, brushing her fingers through his fur. He's more than that. He's family. Max let out a soft whine, resting his head against Liam's side. The night had been long and terrifying, but as Emma held her son and their protector close, she knew they'd made it through, together. And whatever came next, they'd face it the same way, as a family. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Emma sat in one of the hard plastic chairs, her hands trembling as she held Liam close. The boy clutched Max's leash in his small fingers, even though the dog had been rushed into surgery hours ago. Max is going to be okay, right, Mom? Liam's voice was barely above a whisper. Emma blinked back tears. He has to be, sweetheart. The image of Max collapsing after the fight replayed in her mind. His body limp, his breathing shallow, but his eyes still locked on Liam as if he were holding on just for him. She couldn't lose him, not after everything. The door to the exam room creaked open. Emma shot to her feet, pulling Liam up with her. Dr. Jensen, the veterinarian, walked out, her expression tired but hopeful. He made it through surgery, she said. Emma let out a sob of relief. But, Dr. Jensen hesitated. He's not out of the woods yet. The injuries were severe. Broken ribs, internal bleeding. It's going to be a long recovery. Can we see him? Liam asked, his voice trembling. Dr. Jensen nodded. Just for a few minutes. Emma and Liam followed her into the room. Max lay on a padded bed, his body wrapped in bandages. An IV dripped slowly beside him, and a heart monitor beeped softly in the background. Max, Liam whispered. The dog's tail thumped weakly against the bed. Max, Liam cried, rushing to his side. He dropped to his knees and buried his face in the dog's fur. Emma knelt beside them, her hand trembling as she stroked Max's head. You saved us, she whispered. You saved my son. Max lifted his head just enough to nuzzle Liam's cheek before letting it drop back down. Over the next few weeks, Max's recovery became a community effort. News of his heroism spread quickly, and neighbors who had once shunned Emma now brought food, offered rides, and even chipped in to help with Max's medical bills. Mrs. Peterson, the landlord who had threatened eviction, showed up with a petition and signed by every tenant, demanding Max be allowed to stay. I misjudged him, she admitted. We all did. Elizabeth, Emma's former mother-in-law also had a change of heart. She dropped the custody case, admitting she had let her fear of losing control blind her to what was best for Liam. "I see now," she said tearfully. "That dog, he's part of this family." And he was. Mac's recovery wasn't easy, but Liam never left his side. He read books aloud to him, practiced piano in the same room, and even slept on the floor beside him until the dog was strong enough to climb onto the bed again. One evening, Emma stood in the doorway and watched them. Liam sat cross-legged on the carpet, running his fingers gently over Mac's fur. "You know what, Max?" Liam said. "I was scared of the dark before you came, but now when you're with me, it doesn't feel so dark anymore." Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. She had worried for so long about how to protect Liam, about how to give him the tools he needed to navigate a world that wasn't built for him. But in the end, it wasn't something she had given him at all. It was Max. Months later, Max was back on his feet, still carrying scars, still walking with a slight limp, but as alert and protective as ever. On the first day Liam returned to school, Max walked beside him, his head held high. Emma stood at the gate and watched as Liam confidently led the way, his hand resting lightly on Max's back. "Are you ready, buddy?" Liam asked. Max barked once, his tail wagging. The other kids stared at first, but soon they were crowding around, asking questions, wanting to pet him. "He's a hero," Liam said proudly, and for the first time, he didn't look afraid of standing out. That night, as they walked home, Emma looked at her son and the dog who had saved him, not just from the pond that night, but from fear, from doubt, from loneliness. "You okay, Mom?" Liam asked. Emma smiled and reached down to scratch Max behind the ears. "I've never been better," she said. As they disappeared down the sidewalk, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the street. And for the first time in a long time, Emma knew they were safe. Because Max was there. Because Max would always be there. Thank you so much for joining us on this emotional journey with Max, Liam, and Emma. Their story is one of courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a boy and his best friend. But this is just the beginning. What new challenges will they face? What surprises lie ahead? If you're as invested in their story as we are, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories like this one. And we want to hear from you. Have you ever had a dog or a pet that changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to feature your experiences in future videos. Don't forget to turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon, so you'll be the first to know when we release the next chapter of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, share it with your friends and family, because sometimes we all need a reminder of the extraordinary love and loyalty our four-legged friends bring into our lives. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.